Okay, let's jump right in. We're looking at uh, a pretty significant event in the Middle East recently, specifically in Beirut.
That's right. It's a report from a correspondent who was, well, right there on the ground.
Exactly. So what they saw, what they heard, that's our mission here, isn't it?
It is. To unpack this single piece of reporting, see what it tells us about these recent Israeli airstrikes in Beirut. The details, the reasons given by different sides.
But only as stated in the source. That's key.
Crucial. And the immediate impact, the human side of it. We're digging into this one perspective, trying to understand the event just through their lens.
Okay, so what does this report actually say happened? The core event.
Israeli airstrikes. They hit Beirut's southern suburbs. That's the main.
نزلنا مثل ما نحن هيك نحن هيدا اللي بين معكم انه هيدا مبنى سكني بس.
Right. And Israel's side of the story, according to the report, what were they targeting?
Well, the Israeli military claimed in the report, that the target was underground facilities, ones they allege Hezbollah uses for drone production.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, reporting from these situations. The correspondent added something important about that claim, didn't they?
They did. A really crucial caveat. They stated very clearly that at the time they filed the report, that claim about drone facilities, it couldn't be independently verified, not by them, not by other journalists there. It just highlights that fog, the uncertainty in these moments.
That verification point is definitely something to hold on to from this source. Okay, let's talk timing and scale. This wasn't just any strike, according to the correspondent.
No, definitely not. They pointed out it was the first time Israel had targeted Beirut, the capital, in over a month.
A month's gap. And what about warnings? The report mentioned warnings.
Yeah, the strikes apparently came about an hour after Israel issued evacuation orders for that specific area.
An hour's notice. We'll come back to that. But the scale, that seemed to be a major point in the report.
It really did. The correspondent emphasized this was the biggest attack on the capital, on Beirut, since November.
Since November. Wow.
Yeah. And they contrasted it, An earlier attack, maybe 5 weeks before this one, hit just one building.
Just one.
But this time, the warnings went out for 8 different buildings. 8. Spread across 4 different locations.
8 buildings, 4 locations. That's a completely different level of intensity described in this source.
Exactly. A massive difference.
So zooming out a bit, the report puts this into the context of that ceasefire, the one agreed back in November.
That agreement was supposed to end what the source called a full-blown war between Hezbollah and Israel.
Supposed to.
Right.
But the correspondent noted, well, it hasn't exactly been quiet since then.
Far from it. The report states there have been several violations of that ceasefire since November. Lots of incidents.
And where have most of those happened, according to the source?
Typically down south, in the south of Lebanon. That's where most of the friction has been reported.
But not exclusively.
No. The source says Beirut had actually been hit 3 times before this latest attack.
Yeah.
Just apparently not on this scale.
Okay, so a pattern of violations. But this Beirut attack is described as a significant step up. The report also tries to give the why, right? The stated reasons from both sides for why things are still tense.
It does. It presents Israel's stated view first.
Which is?
According to the source, Israel claims they are, quote, implementing the ceasefire agreement, their justification. They say Hezbollah still hasn't been fully disarmed, contrary to the agreement.
Okay, that's one side's claim presented in the report. What about the Lebanese or Hezbollah argument, as the source puts it?
Their position, again as reported, is kind of the flip side. Hezbollah hasn't handed back all its weapons, true, but the source mentions the Lebanese army suggests this probably won't happen until Israel stops its attacks and, crucially, ends its occupation of territory in South Lebanon.
And the logic presented there in the report.
The thinking reported is that the ongoing occupation gives Hezbollah, well, an argument, a reason to say the conflict isn't really over and that they still need to defend people, protect territory.
It's really important we stress, like you said, we're just relaying the positions as found in this report. We're not endorsing any of it.
Absolutely. Strict neutrality on the claims themselves, just reporting what the source contains.
Okay, so beyond the claims and counterclaims, the report gets into the human side, the immediate impact on ordinary people. What did the correspondent see after those warnings went out?
Chaos, basically. Massive traffic jams, people just scrambling, trying desperately to get out of the targeted areas.
And the report mentioned something about how these warnings often play out a pattern.
Yeah, the correspondent observed that the Israeli army often seems to use this approach. Smaller initial warning strikes happened about an hour after the evacuation orders.
Okay.
And then that's followed by the really big strike, the main attack, which is apparently what happened here.
And that hour window, the correspondent had a take on that, didn't they? An hour sounds like, well, an hour, but
But their perspective from the ground was that it's really not much time at all, for people trying to actually get themselves and their families out, especially under that kind of pressure.
yeah, I can only imagine. And there was another layer to the timing, something incredibly specific and poignant mentioned in the report.
Yes. This wasn't just any evening. The report highlights it was the first evening of Eid al-Adha.
Eid. Oh, wow. That's that changes the picture quite a bit.
It really does. It's
Yeah.
a major Muslim holiday. The report notes that many people in those specific neighborhoods, the ones targeted, they were gathered together with family, with loved ones, celebrating.
So in the middle of holiday celebration.
Exactly. That's when the threat of bombing landed. You can just imagine the panic, the disruption, turning a family celebration into terror in flight.
And the report added some geographical context, too, about why evacuating was so hard.
Yes, it described the southern suburbs of Beirut as being very, very densely populated,
Right. Lots of people close together.
which just makes getting out quickly incredibly difficult. So that density directly fed into those huge traffic jams, the panic the correspondent saw.
Okay, so let's just quickly pull together the main threads from this deep dive into this one report. We've got the core event, the strikes in Beirut's southern suburbs.
We have Israel's reported claim about targeting drone facilities, but crucially, the correspondents note that this was unverified at the time.
We looked at the timing first strike on the capital in a month and the scale. This being described as the biggest attack there since November, with multiple buildings targeted.
And we placed in the context the report provided, the November ceasefire and the violations since then. Plus, those differing stated reasons for the ongoing conflict, Israel's and the Lebanese Hezbollah side's arguments, again, strictly as reported.
And finally, maybe most vividly, that immediate human impact. The traffic jams, the warning strike pattern, the sheer difficulty of evacuating in an hour from a dense area.
And that incredibly stark detail about it being the first night of Eid al-Adha. Families celebrating, suddenly facing bombs.
Really going through a source like this, piece by piece, pulling out the correspondence observations, the specifics like the holiday timing, the scale, the unverified claims, it does give you a much more sort of granular feel for it than you get from just a headline.
Definitely. It helps build a more informed picture,
Oh,
always remembering it's based on this specific report.
exactly.
And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Given what this source tells us, the difficulty verifying info in real time, the conflicting claims flying around, the very real human chaos described, like families fleeing a holiday gathering. How does understanding those specific details change how you perceive events like this unfolding in conflict zones? It really makes you consider how we even begin to grasp the why and the what's from afar.